they fired this guy.
Like probably same day.
I don't know. It wasn't very much longer. They just said, "Hey, you want to come up and work in engineering and basically do his job there?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." Yeah, because I played guitar, and have since I was 10. I got in just really kind of close with the people around. Everybody knew I played guitar, and so sometimes the guys in R&D, they didn't have anybody over there that played guitar.
Which is strange in a guitar company and not a lot of guitar players.
Yeah, you had really good engineers over there.
Welcome back to the studio. Here at Liness for this week, we have the pleasure to be interviewing Paul Gagon, an electrical engineer and designer who's worked with companies such as Fender, Charvel Jackson, BBE, and G&L. He also works as a consultant and amp repair technician and has some of his circuits actually played by some famous people, notably Eric Clapton. Let's dive into his background and legacy in this part 1. Hey, Paul.
Hey there.
Welcome to the studio. Welcome to the channel.
Thanks.
So, you've worked on several of my amps, and I've always been really, interested in what you've been doing, not just for me, but your whole background and everything. So just, for the audience and for me, just, how did you get started in electronics and repairs and designing?
Wow. That's a long story. Simply, my dad was one of the vice presidents of Northrop, the aerospace, and we don't really know what he did a lot of. There was a few things that he did. He had patents on these like navigational systems for the flying wing, way back when that was being built and stuff. But he was into electronics, and so he would always bring components and things home because he knew that I liked tinkering around with stuff. And Heathkit was a big company that was around when I was a kid. You could build your own radio, build your own guitar amp, build your own, all this electronic stuff.
They just had their kits.
Yeah, and I was really into it. It just, for some reason, I gravitated towards it. It was fun to build stuff. And then, of course, my dad would, encourage that. He'd bring home all kinds of neat stuff there. And he had one of the first oscilloscopes I'd ever seen. And so, at a young age, and then I was a real, to dig around in the trash can, scavenger. The neighborhood people would throw away, stuff like TV sets. First TV set I ever had was from 2 TVs that somebody's thrown into the trash. I took them both home. Between my dad, his friend, and me, we got the thing operational. So it was a black and white television set.
Revived it.
My first amp was actually, somebody tossed away one of those big monster console units that you used to see people's living room, a big walnut green, then had the turntable and an AM FM receiver and a little amplifier and everything. I just ripped the amp out of the thing, took it home, cobbled it together, made a guitar in and hooked up to a speaker, and that was the amp I played in little bands, in the early years. And
it sounded decent?
Well, to me it did. Mercifully, nobody ever recorded any of that crap. But, it was like you just...
Do you still have that?
No, that's long gone, yeah. There's a bunch of stuff that I wish I'd have held on to, but they're just, just old electronic piles of stuff. I still have a lot of junk from the 70s, in my storage area that I use for repairs. But that was kind of the beginning of the interest. I was always fascinated and interested in electronics and stuff like that. And, as time went on, my brother had mentioned, hey, Fender's got this opportunity there. He knew somebody that was at Fender. Said they're looking for a technician. And I thought, well, I would love to work at Fender. That would be great.
What year was this?
It would have been 1978. I drove up there and applied, took the test, because to be a technician, they actually have this big, gigantic, test with multiple pages. Well, in this circuit, what part is doing this and what part is doing that? And it's like, okay, well, I think I got this. And I did well enough where they brought me on to be a service technician. And so I worked at the benches repairing, the vacuum tube amps, all the Fender guitar and bass amps.
Mixers.
Yeah, they had the big mixing board, I think it was called the M12, and they had a lot of different kinds of products that they would make. And so as a bench technician, you're always switching all your stuff out, trying to go, okay, well, we're going to work on the mixers. Okay, tear all this stuff down. I go, this is a real pain in the butt. Why don't we just make a bench with all the interfacing and all, the signal generators and everything? It's all right here. You slide up what you're working on, and you can just do all this stuff together. And one of the guys that was, he had his little master's in an engineer, electrical engineer, and he came down and he's like, well, we need to fix these benches. We need to make this more, not cost effective, but just more efficient to work on this stuff. And so, what would you do? And they go, well, what I would do is kind of what I've been doing, but I'll build a big box and have the panels and everything set up. And so I outfitted my bench with exactly what you would need, and then just made stuff for the other people with their benches. And I didn't know that this, knucklehead was going up into the engineering staff, telling them that he was the one coming up with all these designs, and that
pulling a two-face.
Yeah, and I don't know anything about this. I'm just down doing my job. We're just trying to work on all the repairs and things. And then, just as the months roll on, somebody from upper management's just kind of walking through and just, hey, what do you think of all these new benches and stuff like that? Let's face up their design for you. What do you think?
I can imagine the look on your face there.
What do you mean, what do I think? This is my stuff. I designed it, all this stuff there. And I'm showing them my drawings and the schematics and everything. I go, this is what I did. This is what I'm doing down here with I was the lead technician. And they fired this guy.
Probably same day?
I don't know. It wasn't very much longer. They just said, hey, you want to come up and work in engineering and basically do his job there? And I said, yeah, I do. Yeah. So that's how I got up into the industrial and manufacturing engineering is up in that. It was because of that event there. And then from there, they had me go down and work on the pickups, and that's where I was, that
was your first task there?
Yeah, that was first task. They just go, man, they go, hey, Gagan, get down there and fix these microphonic pickups, man. We're getting all these complaints from the marketing guys and the salespeople. They're just saying, and then that story I told you about that. And it was just like one project after another. But the thing that was really cool is that because I played guitar and have since I was 10, I got in just really kind of close with the people around. Everybody knew I played guitar, and so sometimes the guys in R&D, they didn't have anybody over there that played guitar.
Which is strange in a guitar company and not a lot of guitar players.
Yeah, you had really good engineers over there. And, several of them were, they taught in universities, and then they had been hired to come in and work. They were really good engineers, but they didn't play guitar. And so they're building these guitar amps, and so they would ask, could I come over and play them? And so, I would go over there and play guitar through the amps and stuff and go, well.
And you get a real world perspective of how
and I go, it's okay, but, it seems kind of bright. It doesn't really sound particularly good, because these were some of the early solid state ones that they were doing. And I go, well, I think that my opinion, I would maybe change this circuit here a little bit, maybe take some of the top end out of this stuff here. And it doesn't sound like a particularly good distortion. Maybe do gain like that, it just make a suggestion. I never figured anything would come of it. It was just, I was just being, friends and cool to the guys over there. And I'd go back and do my job there. And but eventually it was an opportunity to come over there because they knew me and they knew I could play guitar. They go, well, why don't you come over here and work with us in R&D? And I'm going, oh man, it would be so awesome. And so it was cool, and I jammed with the guys during lunchtime. And so I was in really good and tight with these R&D guys here. And so they, accepted me in there and got to do projects. And that's actually when I started doing the analysis of that Elite Strat.
How many people were in that crew?
Oh, you'd see, you had probably about 7 or 8 engineers, and you had a couple of draftsmen, and then some service techs that would put together projects for people like that. And I was one of the engineers that was working on just kind of specifically guitar type products, like the TBX control, kind of modifying that little mid boost thing. They're changing it a little bit, fixing pickup issues and things like that. And it was, I don't know, it was a great time. Playing guitar has opened so many doors for me to being able to relate to people, the guitar world and stuff, and people making products for them. And so, if you made a pedal and you're saying, hey, what do you think of this pedal? Okay, I use them. And so I would be somebody that you could ask questions of, but if they're just going, well, on the scope, we got our we got the curve and everything that we like there.
Yeah,
And
if the graph looks one way versus another, it's like, well, how does it actually
That's really
respond?
great and everything, but I don't particularly like the way it sounds. And I don't think guitar players are going to necessarily dig this. So maybe we try a couple other things there. So that was my time at Fender kind of ended in '84. That they were having a lot of problems. I think the sales numbers were dropping. I think CBS was getting a little bit tired of it, and so it was.
Were they just not on top of like making new enough products, or just
I think it was. I think it was just some of the wrong directions. Maybe not paying attention to where things were going. I remember guys talk about like Mesa Boogie, wow, these new high gain amps and everything like that, and multiple stages and stuff. And they were trying to come up with
maybe the hair metal whole era was kind of wanting more high gain.
And you don't necessarily think of a Fender twin reverb when Megadeth is out there on stage, or somebody wanted a really heavy high gain sound. And and so they were trying their way to get into that and stuff. And I don't know, just for some reason it just never really translated well. And so the sales kind of dropped off. I don't know that they necessarily paid attention to all the trends that well. And so you were seeing more and more of the just workforce at Fender dwindle. I remember there was, they had like an employee roster, and there was like 1,300 employees there, working in that facility in Fullerton. And I remember it got down to, it was 259 on the day that I was called in, and they said, we're really cutting back. We don't have anything that we need in your area that you're engineering, so we're gonna let you go. And so I was like, I understood it. It was cool. And my boss, it was neat. He felt so bad about it. He goes, you know what? Everything in your office, load it into your van and just take it home with you. I had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of components, amps, guitars, and stuff like that. And he just said, look,
just take it.
We're shutting all this stuff kind of down here. We're not going to be using it. He goes, just load
take
it up.
the money and run.
Yeah, so that was real cool. And I still have a lot of that stuff from that time that I used for repairs.
Severance package.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. And I had gotten in really, really tight with Grover Jackson during about the last year of working there, because he knew some people at Fender, and he came down to kind of tour the facility, and everybody was kind of busy, and so they asked me, could I give Grover a tour? And so I go, yeah, sure. Hi Grover, I'm Paul. We're gonna take a little tour of the factory. And he was really, really curious in pickups, because he had been buying Seymour Duncan pickups for all of his Jackson Charvel guitars. And he's like, well, so what do you know about pickups and stuff? Do you think you'd be able to, make your own? And I was like, well, yeah. I mean, it's like I know all of the parts and the materials and the machines, everything that you would need. And he just he goes, well, if anything ever happens here, just call me up. I'd be real interested in having you come and work. So I knew I had a soft place to land when I got called into Fender, to get let go. I mean, they let me go. I went back to my office. I called up Grover. It was a Friday. And he said, I'll see you tomorrow. And so I went to work Saturday, the next morning, working for Charvel Jackson. And the first order of business, let's make a line of pickups. And so
all mix of single coil and humbucker, and all different.
Everything, like anything for a Telly, anything for a Strat, Les Pauls, all the guitars he was making, the 2 humbuckers, and then a variety of humbuckers, and and it's like, you got to be careful. You just go, well, let's just make everything, because that's not cost effective when you're starting off. And so you go
a little more.
You go,
selective.
Let's go where the kind of meat and potatoes of everything is, or let's get into it like Strat Telly. We had a P-bass pickup, jazz bass, and a couple of humbuckers that were right in the middle, because somebody says, well, I want my favorite humbucker pickup is, and you go, fill in that line. Well, if you ask 100 guitar players, you're going to get 100 different pickups there. And so you go, let's just wind a wide variety of them, take them out, and just let people play them. And then just kind of go, the majority of them kind of are in this area right here.
It's like when people do sample sales just to see what sells, and then they manufacture them, based on what sold.
Yeah, you're trying to get as much market as you can, but you can, in the beginning, make something for everybody. And so, we were very lucky. You see, at Jackson, Grover he was such good friends with so many of the bands. Everybody wanted to know Grover. I mean, really likable guy. He's very knowledgeable about guitars and stuff like that. So they would come in, and so I could just grab them and just say, hey, bring your guitar and amp in, and I've got a bunch of different pickups I'd like you to try, and we'll just go through this thing. And then
he'd be all for it.
Yeah, and so he goes, tell me what you think about this. Well, that one's too bright. That was good. I like that one there. It's like, you make your notes and stuff like that. And I eventually ended up making 2 gigantic suitcases. And one was filled with these humbucker pickups in 100-turn increments, all the way from kind of a light down to pretty heavy.
What was the lightest?
The lightest was like 5,000 turns of wire on it. And then the heaviest went to a very tiny gauge, and you put like 14,000 turns on these things. So they were very, very heavy.
So I'm curious on the original Fender pickups, when you're saying they're like 1,600, so now a light would be 5,000.
Yeah, now 1,600 was what they were going off of, this like machine worm gear driven spindle indicator, which had nothing to do with the actual revolutions of it.
Okay.
And so this is the paper I found that Seth Lever was doing. They had these other engineers doing the ratio. They go, well, 1,600 means 7,600. But then I would look at another pickup, and 1,600 means 7,800. I go, well, wait a minute, the ratios should be the same. But they were all different. And so it was just kind of randomly assigning this stuff.
The Wild West.
And it made it really, really difficult. And so I go, well, the bulk of vintage Strat pickups are going to be somewhere in that 8,000 turns to about 8,200 turns. And so you just kind of go, well, let's just pick it right here. We're going to make the pickups like this. And they sounded really, really good in virtually all the Strats that they were making at the time. And, there were outliers, of course. If you had a guitar that was really, really like heavy, kind of a little bit kind of a bright sounding guitar.
You got like 9,000 or
something.
Yeah,
you want to make, you would buy another pickup. You would just say, I like this pickup that DiMarzio makes. It helps my guitar. It sounds a little bit meatier. And you go, fine, We could wind a pickup heavier there, but then, I'm going to make one pickup for each person who wants, pickup stuff. And so, you had that, but I did have access to a lot of great ears, a bunch of people coming in, and they helped steer. It wasn't like I sit down and go, all Jackson pickups will be this, 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 and this. It was like, hey, I'm going to just wind these things all over the place here. We're going to let you listen to all of it, and you tell me where the bulk of you like this stuff here. And that was the lineup that we ended up with, is that, you listen to the people, and, there were people who just go, well, I always prefer Seymour Duncan, Pearly Gates, or whatever it is. And you go, oh, fine, use that pickup.
So other than the magnets and the winding, what other components in a pickup really will make a difference in
whether or not you put a metal cover over it, a lot of times a base plate material, the magnet, if you buy some sources of magnets are not necessarily as high a grade as others, So
some might be called Alnico 2 from here and Alnico 2 from here, but they'd still not be
they'll call it an Alnico 5, but the formulation of it, it's pretty sketchy in this, and you do that by you charging them up and you measure them. You have your little Gauss meters, you can measure the magnetic field and stuff. You check at them and you go, they're close, but they're different. And if they're enough different, they have an impact. And then the metal...
Same thing as like your pots might be different values of resistance.
Oh, yeah. Because I remember doing that with somebody. He goes, well, I always use 250K pots in my Stratocasters because they sound perfect there. But, I'm using this thing here, and I don't know, your pickup sounds like, it's a little bit too bright, or it's a little this. And I go, well, is it my pickup or is it your pot? So you go, well, let's measure your pot, and we've got a bunch of different guitars and stuff there. And, this one is measuring like 265K. This one is like measuring 220K. So this lower one,
labeled at 250.
Yeah, this lower one is squishing down the pickup and going to make it sound a little bit softer, and that's why you think it doesn't sound bright enough. And it's like, wow, they don't realize that these things matter. The pickup pot, the actual value that the resistance is, the tone cap that you're using, the tolerances in that, the guitar cord, the cable that you use to hook into
and the
your
length
amp,
too.
and the length of it, the manufacturer. remember.
And if it's oxygen free or solderless, yeah, all the.
Don't get me started on that rabbit hole, man. No, it's really interesting is that if you spend the time with enough test equipment and you measure stuff, you go, there are things that are real. There are things that I can measure. Can't always hear it, but there are things I can measure. And then there's things that you just can't freaking measure or hear, and people will spout off that, oh, this is a magical thing here, and
Well,
you
that's
just
what
go,
gets in the snake oil.
You go,
side of
yeah,
things.
you know, I'm going to just leave that, and you know, if you sell some, you know, more power to you. But there are a lot of real issues and stuff, and one of them is cable capacitance and stuff. And I do have this story that I tell people. Ronnie James Dio, when he was putting his band together, he had a guitar player, Craig Golding, and I got a call. I was at Jackson, and he says, "Can you come up and help me with these pickups? They just sound my sound is just crap. It's so bright and shrill." And so I go up there and I'm listening to it and just go, "Oh man, no kidding. This just sounds really bright and terrible."
What kind of guitar was he playing?
He had one of the Jackson ones, but he had his pickup, one of our lighter wound ones, but he was running a wireless system. And so he's got this wireless setup, and it's going over, you know, quite a distance over to his head it was like a Marshall amp into his stack. And I go, "What? I know you don't like using guitar chords, but will you humor me? Let's just try something." So I got a, you know, line, like a 20-foot cord, plugged it into his guitar, went over to the amp, and he plays it, and he goes, "Okay, that sounds great. That's what I want. What's going on? What's happening here?" And I go, "Well, the cable capacitance for this long cord is loading your pickup and making it resonate lower, so it sounds deeper and beefier to you. But you go into this wireless thing, and basically there's no loading on it. It's just shooting straight over."
And that was before they had the cable length rotary. Like on my line 6, there's a cable length rotary.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, people learned that, you know, the early wireless systems, man, they made your guitar sound really bright. And it's like, well, what am I going to do there? And so I go, well, you know, this is a really dumb thing to do, but I go, let's unplug this cord, leave it in your guitar, plug it from your amp, get a little a fixer. We can join this to your wireless thing here, go through the cable into your wireless, and then shoot it over to the amp. And it's like, wow, that sounds so much better. I go, okay, well, yeah, that's not going to be practical, walking around with a big old coil of wire.
So you just got to solder something in there.
Yeah, and so I came up with a capacitor that we could solder into it, and a little toggle switch. So if he was going to use the cable, he could disengage the capacitor, run the cable over to the amp. If he's going to run the wireless, he'd want to activate and throw that equivalent capacitance across the pickup, then go into the wireless over to the amp there, and he'd go, "This is great, yeah, this will work," you know, and that got me thinking, though, because at the same time that I was playing with that, Journey was getting ready. I think they were working on the Raised on Radio album. And I had been making tube preamps for Neil. And Neil Sean had a model of guitar. It was an odd-looking thing. It had a big old gigantic headstock. It had the Sean guitar, and it kind of reminded me of like an Explorer, but it was going to be his model, and he wanted to have a buffer preamp in it, but he goes, "I hate these things because they always sound bright and just really cramping." So I go, "Well, if I made you a buffer preamp where you could load down the pickup with 8 different values of capacitor, that would help
There's
you
a
move."
preamp pedal you're talking about?
No, it actually went inside the guitar. It was a little buffer preamp, and then I had all these little mini toggle switches where he could set the resonant frequency of the pickup that he liked. And so you could just set that where you like it.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, then you can button the thing up, and then you can run whatever cord that you want, or you can run wireless, you know, whatever you want to do. But you fix the loading in your guitar. And he goes, "Oh, that'd be great there." So I made him, you know, he loved them. And then every single model of those Sean guitars went with that preamp in it. And so Jackson actually offered that. It was a JE 1000, Jackson Electronics 1000 buffer preamp with selectable pickup loading on it.
Is that something any other guitar maker put in their guitars, or was that unique to them?
At the time, I wasn't aware of anybody doing that. I did it to kind of address a problem that Neil had, and then what I had learned from working with Craig Golding, some of that. So, I mean, it's a common thing. People know about loading down the pickup and stuff like that. So, you know, it wasn't like, you know, oh my gosh, revolutionary. But it was just it was a addressing a problem. You just go in the simplest manner that I could come up with. And Jackson Electronics holds quite a lot of little preamps. You had things that go in the bass, treble and bass control, and a little parametric EQ. And
so you'd really customize it, yeah.
Yeah, it was just kind of fun electronic things you could put in your guitar to, rather than swap out pickups all the time. You could put this thing in and change a resonant frequency around a little bit there, and it was kind of cool. A lot of stuff I got to do with Grover. We had a line of Jackson tube amps, and it was from, because I used to modify people, they bring up their Marshalls and stuff, and they go, dude, I want to put in an extra channel. Can I get some more gain out of this thing? I go, yeah, if you don't mind me popping a hole in your chassis and dropping another tube in there. They go, yeah, do what you want. And so I would modify a lot of these Marshall heads and stuff. And you come up with some cool little mods and extra gain stages. And then Grover one time, he goes, we were just sitting talking, and he goes, well, why don't we just make a Jackson tube amp
with 3 channels?
It was almost like a JCM 800, but just had a goosed up gain stage and had like a mid boost thing. You could change where the frequency was or where you were boosting the mids and stuff. And
I always like that when it had a mid shift, or not even just a button, but you could actually dial in the exact frequency.
It's very helpful. Mid range on a guitar is very helpful especially when trying to overdrive it. And so we made it, took it to an AM show. Actually, I made a whole line of Charvel solid state amps too. We had everything from a little 5-watt, little tabletop thing, to a 200-watt, with a bass reflex head and 120-watt guitar amp and everything. A whole line of solid state Charvel amps. And then this 50 and then 100-watt version of a tube head and full stack Jackson amps. And, they made those. They didn't make a lot of them. They made them for probably about a year or so. And I don't know if there's a company called IMC, International Music Company. They kind of came in and kind of merged with Jackson a little bit, and they started futzing around with stuff. And, well, let's change this. And, we need to save money here. We need to do this stuff. It kind of boogered up the amp thing there. They changed a lot of stuff, forced a lot of things that we weren't really happy with there. And
just a lot of things moving in different directions.
Yeah, it's a big company. They were moving in a lot of different kind of areas, and they had a Kai and a bunch of the Ross brand. And so they were real busy doing a lot of stuff, and Jackson Amp was, I think, just kind of a distraction and didn't really get the attention I think it deserved. And so it just kind of just dwindled and just went away, But it created a ton of stories about this amp. Because they go, the Jackson amp, that was made by Laney. I'm going, well, where did that one come from? The Jackson amp, that was designed by this person over here. And I'm going, if you create a vacuum around something that happens, the stories will come from all over the place and fill that void, it seems like, because I never corrected anybody on any of that stuff. They go, the Jackson amp came about from me and Grover sitting, just after work talking about, let's make one of these. And you go, all right. And so,
people make up their own
it's
stuff.
Like, oh, yeah, I remember when I developed the Jackson amp thing, and I'm going, what are you talking about? There was funny. There was an actual Facebook page about this. I had no idea of it, except somebody had mentioned, they go, hey, are you aware there's this guy taking all this credit and stuff for the Jackson amp? I go, well, where's that? And he goes, oh, there's this guy running a Facebook page. And so I go over to this thing, and it's all these guys who have Jackson amps that want to know, well, what's the history about this thing? Because nobody ever told anybody anything. And I don't spend my life worrying about that. I move on to my next job. And so I was just amazed to go, who are these people that are, weaving these amazing stories about the life of this amp and how it came about and everything? And so I wrote to the guys that, hey, do you want me to clear all this up for you and just kind of tell you what's out there? So I sent them all of my hand-drawn schematics, photos of all the hand-built prototypes that I built, and then the production models the correspondence back and forth between me and the manufacturer that was a company in Bradford, England, that was doing it. I go, this is the story behind this amp.
And all this other
stuff, they're just going,
mythological-
crap, so it just all of a sudden shut down.
Oh, that's funny. Everyone's like, oh, we've been bamboozled.
Well, it's just, I find it really fascinating, interesting. And I don't really spend a lot of time worrying or caring about that. The TBX was the same thing, though. All the people that came out of the woodwork just said, oh, yeah, the TBX control is this, and I designed that, and that was during the time of here and there. I'm going, none of that's true. And then when I find that, I just go, okay, here's the patent for this thing, and you notice that it's my name is on it. Here's the circuit for it. Here's the pictures of the scans that I did when I was going about this. And it's just to kind of add clarity to the history of it. I don't care.
It's good to set the record straight, just for people, just for historical purposes.
Yeah, it's not like I'm looking for, hey, good job. It's just like, just so that people know why it happened, what drove it, and just what the real story is behind it and everything. It's like, I can't spend my life worrying about stuff like that. I like creating and building stuff like that. Jackson gave me a tremendous room to just create all kinds of cool stuff, and we made stuff that never went into production, but made like rack mount active direct boxes back, I think, before people were doing that. We had all kinds of like vacuum tube preamps. I think Neil Sean has a couple of the ones that were hand built for him. And the one though that was really cool, and this leads to a story with Jeff Beck. There was a company called Shadow Electronics, and I knew the president really well of the company. So when I go to the NAMM shows, he would always call me over and go, hey, look at the new stuff we're making. And he had this thing that was called a GTM6, guitar to MIDI converter. And you could put this board into your guitar. It didn't have to modify with weird pickups and stuff. It used a little piezo crystal saddle. And you could come out MIDI, plug into a MIDI keyboard, and from the guitar, play any patch on the MIDI keyboard. And it worked really well. I thought it was very cool.
Was there latency?
A little bit, but nothing that was really, that I found annoying, especially if you were playing up high. Down on the open strings, there was enough latency where you would go, okay, I can hear it, but
But you could adjust to it.
Yeah, it wasn't overly annoying like it happened with some other products that were around. So this one, I was impressed with it enough that I took the idea to the guys at IMC that were controlling Jackson at the time. And they said, hey, that's great. Let's hook up to this thing. We'll put it under the Charvel name, so it'll be the Charvel GTM6. And so we took it to an AM show, and a bunch of people played it, and was just going, wow, that sounds really cool. And then Grover calls me up, and he says, hey, Jeff Beck heard about this, and he wants to try it out. He's up in the Beverly Hills Hotel. Go take it up there to him and let him try it out there. And I'm going, you kidding me? Get to go ahead and hang out with Jeff Beck. This is great. I packed the thing up, take a big MIDI keyboard, the GTM6, and some guitars and stuff. So I'm up there, and me and Jeff Beck just hanging out in his hotel room. He's playing this guitar to MIDI converter, and he's such an amazing player. He's pulling up like flute patches and all these just weird things.
Going off,
and he's just playing all this crazy stuff, and you're going, dude, I can't believe I'm here hanging out with Jeff Beck in his hotel room. And he's just, it was unreal.
You get a one-person show.
It was
private show.
It was just the coolest, But that's kind of life with Jackson Charvel. I mean, it was just like you're in the eye of a hurricane all the time. But it was like, hey, this band's playing over here in the studio. Take your gear up there. Somebody needs a guitar or pickup. And
wasn't there also a Steve Vai story at that time?
Yeah, actually, there was two, Vinnie Vincent and Steve Vai. I was working with, actually, the first one was Vinnie Vincent. He was with, let's see, he was doing something with Kiss, and for some reason, I can't remember if he got booted out of the band or he just got irritated with them and left. But he wanted to have his own model of guitar, so he had it was the Vinnie Vincent guitar. It was a V, and then another V that was kind of superposed like underneath it, so it looked like two V's. One was painted, and the other was just like natural wood. And it had the big old nice, straight, flat, heavy metal neck, and everything. And so I designed the pickups for that guitar. And he's telling me, he goes, hey, I'm going to be in the studio. We're going to work on this album, and I want to run 5 100-watt Marshall stacks, full stacks, in the studio there. And I'm just thinking, why would you want to do that?
Depends on how much he doesn't like his neighbors.
I'm just thinking, this is ridiculous. And I go, all right. But, you can't just daisy chain these amps all together. And so I made him a little interface box. You could plug his guitar in, set the loading on
you got
the
to
pickups.
actively mold.
Yeah, so it's actively loaded. And then I went out to 5 independent buffer drivers so that I could send that out. And you couldn't be in the room with these amps. And so I had to drive the cables under the door.
The airline graded.
Oh, it was
noise suppressing headphones.
Insane how loud this thing was there. So, he's running out there, and you got these big 5 full stack, 100-watt full stacks out there, and he's just wailing on this thing, and I'm just going, this is so unbelievably loud. And there's the guy out there trying to do the microphone placement and stuff like that. And I was like,
that's like your danger zone.
There's no way,
there.
man. No, you just throw mics up out there in the room and, cross your fingers and just go, let's try to get something like that. But it was just kind of funny. And he's always asking me for like interface boxes. Hey, I got a big rack unit here, and I want to be able to switch all this stuff in and out there. Can you make me a pedal? And then I just hit buttons and switch stuff. And I'm going, why don't you just have your roadie in the back, just turn it and bypass it? And I'm like, no, I want full control that I can just. And this was actually, I wasn't aware of any MIDI controllers that you could interface like you can now. Now you just buy one little switcher box or program it, you can switch all of your gear. But man, back then, it was just you have relay switching all of your effects and plug into this monster with all the in and outs, and it worked really well. But man, it took
more setup.
It was ridiculous how huge this thing was. But Steve Vai wanted something that was similar, but it was much less complicated, because he wanted to run like 3 channels, 3 different heads, and switching things out there. So I would make things for artists that would come in. It was fun to do, and it was a good chance to work with artists. And Steve Vai in particular was just such a nice person, and he treated me just like I was family. I would take stuff up to him at his house. I think it was in Sylmar. It was he had a house with a nice studio in the back. But going up there and hanging out with him, it was great, because it was like, hey, would you like something to eat? It was hanging. You're just in the living room. We're just talking and handing guitars and stuff. And it's very different than going there. Oh, Steve, can I have your autograph? I got a poster. Could you sign my album? When you're just acting like you're just
normal human beings.
You're just normal people. And you're just kind of hanging out, and you're talking and helping each other out there, and it was cool. I got to spend a lot of time with people because of working at Charvel Jackson. That was just really, really nice people, And
that's just, such a step away from the typical Fender musicians and crowd and stuff, going into the harder rock and progressive rock and, metal and, things like that. Like, you probably have some metal stories of, I don't know if you guys ever got in some really heavy bands.
I remember, Wasp was one that was, had like Chris Holmes. He brought in a guitar and stuff. Their show was crazy. With that Blackie Lawless. Those guys were they were actually really nice guys, but their show and the way they acted in public was just insane. And he would, they had this little thing he would do on the guitar, and he goes, hey, yeah, and I like to do this thing where I bring the headstock up and I smack myself in the head, and he did it and he's bleeding all over the guitar, and I go, dude, you're gonna give yourself a concussion,
or poke his eye out if he's not careful.
But they just get all frenzied up there, and you just go, all right, whatever, dude, and then working with it, going to the studio with Rat, they're really great people. I had a lot of fun with them. And when you're hanging with them, and then they tell you the stories, and you're in the studio while they're working on stuff, and you're helping them with the sound, and I remember Robin Crosby. He was one of the ones. I would take my suitcase up, and I had all these pickups, alnicos over here and ceramics over here, and they go, "What do you want to do? What are you listening to?" swap the pickup down. Okay, go play for a little while, and you come back and you go, okay, that one's not really. I want it to be a little bit more, a little darker. That's too bright. You go, okay, we'll get one with more turns of wire. Okay, let's just, and then eventually you end up with them going, okay, that's the deal, man. I like that. Let's go with that one.
So it's more when you have somebody that's looking for something, instead of just thinking about what does this person want, you just let them experiment with a range of things.
Yeah.
Because that was going to be one of my questions. When you're designing something, what are you thinking of at the beginning? Like your target audience, what you would prefer? You know, if
it's not often what I prefer. Basically, a product, the way that it would get developed is that, somebody in marketing will, say, we want a pickup that does this. We want a pedal that does this. We're looking for this
fills
product.
a role.
Yeah, they go, these are the things that we'd like to do. And you go, okay, let me go and start analyzing, what's available now. What are people using? And then you kind of get an idea of what it is you need to do. And then you just start putting circuits together. You make little project boxes. Sometimes they're little pedals, sometimes they're bigger. And then you start bringing people in and you go, want you to try this out and play it and tell me what you think. And they will. If you present it in a manner where they go, I'm interested in what you think. It's not like, well, if I say the right thing, I can get an endorsement deal with it. And I go, no. This is just, I need help and I want to make something that you'll use and that you like. So tell me what you think, and they do, and they're very helpful. And so you can't please everybody, and so what you're trying to do is you get kind of a consensus of, okay, it needs to be this flexible, it needs to have these features. I don't need to spend my time chasing this thing. Let's focus it in here, and then you give it back to marketing, and then they start deciding, what color it's going to be or what they're going to call it, which I'm careless.
Would you find more often than not just adding a mid shift was just helpful in a lot of ways, because that just immediately made things more flexible to people?
Yeah. There are times where I would do something. I go, well, this is what I like, and then I try it. If they don't like it, then I take it out. You cannot take things personally when you're designing product. And I have worked with engineers, and there are people out there that do that. It's like, no, it has to. This is the way it should be. You go, you're going to limit your sales if you do that kind of stuff with that. I'm not making something for me. I'm making something that's going to sell and keep the company afloat. If I want something for me, I'll make something for me. But what you're trying to do is you want to engineer something that's not going to need servicing. That it's built well, using good quality components, and it's what people will use and what they'll buy. And so that's kind of.
And you want them to use it for 30, 40 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You really try to, a well-engineered product, you're not dealing with like, oh man, this thing's going in for service again. I just had it in, it's like this thing's always breaking, or this burns out prematurely. And, servicing amps, like I have for many, many, many years, you look at design, things like that, and you go, that's just not well thought out. That's somebody just taking
putting it together just to sell it right
that's
away.
Somebody just taking the lazy way out, and that's and it ends up being a service problem, and that's why I get so many repairs in for the same thing over and over again. And you just go.
And do you think the repair? We might have touched on this earlier today, but do you think the whole repair aspect is really going to be in trouble once the older generation that knows how to work on these tube amps and stuff, starts retiring? And I know you're already at least semi-retired. To the where, who's going to be fixing these things, or they're just going to trash them and buy new ones at that point?
I guess that remains to be seen. But there certainly are fewer and fewer people, I think, who know how to work on vacuum tube amps safely, because that's dangerous setup there. I know I have seen guys do. They go, oh yeah, tube amp, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can work on that thing there. And they open up and they start messing around there, and you don't realize there's between 450 and 500 volts, traveling around in these things there. And if you're not careful, you can, I know you can get bit by this stuff there. I got nailed once on a 500 volt line there, and it blew me back in my bench. I mean, it's like, you have to be really careful with this stuff there. And so,
Well, that cause you either death or permanent damage to the point where
Yeah.
you're not the same ever again.
yeah. And so, but
I'm really wary when I open up any kind of tube thing. I mean, even solid state, I'm a little paranoid, but I know at least you're not dealing with the capacitors, right? Because the solid state don't really have capacitors.
Yeah, you're not. Well, they have a capacitor, but you're not dealing with high voltages. You may be looking at 20 volts or something like that. But when you got 500 volts, and I won't even work on Ampeg SVTs anymore because there's like a 700 volt line in the thing.
Oh wow!
Well, two reasons. One is it weighs like 80 pounds. So not trying to maneuver the things on a bench is difficult. But yeah,
just the voltages.
A lot of dangerous voltages in there, and you just go, I'm getting up there in age. I'd like to continue, going that direction. So maybe I'll just hold off on those amps there. And so, but I still do a lot of vacuum tube. But well, I've worked on yours. Yeah,
I think by now you did my my Fender DeVille, my Marshall, the other Marshall, the tremolo, super tremolo, my Bad Cat. I'm going to have you work on. The next one, it was either a Silvertone or I forget. I'll have to look at it. I'll bring it in.
Yeah. They're fun to work on. It's enjoyable to play around with the vacuum tubes and stuff. I love the way they sound. The circuits are generally more simple. You get some of the solid state one laid on a circuit board, and there's all this other stuff going on there, and it's like, it's gonna take a little bit more time digging into it, but.
The older stuff, do you find yourself doing a lot of modding for people?
Not so much modding. Mostly it's restoration and repair. Like I get stuff that will be like from the 40s. People have these old Gibson amps or things like that, and they want to have them, restored as so that they're functional. A lot of the parts you can't get them anymore. They're just.
But at least they're as close to the original as possible.
Yeah, and you get it where they can enjoy the amp again. Because otherwise it just sits in a closet somewhere, and they go, "I want to play this," and so you go, "Okay, well let's take the time and really restore this and service it correctly." So that's what I like to do.
That's cool.
And and as us older dudes, start kicking off and stuff, it's going to be the younger guys. And it's not that you can't learn this stuff. I mean, there's plenty of YouTube videos and a lot of stuff there, but the old guards are eventually going to just start, kicking off.
You ever thought about starting a little school of, teaching some younger generation? I mean, you might do some one-on-one for that, but
I've done one-on-one for that. I've had people that really wanted to learn. And it is fun. I'm more than happy to share everything that I know with people like that. And it's fun. I enjoy that. There's not as many people as you might think that go, yeah, I'll sit down with this guy and listen to him yammer on about tubes for a while.
Well, you think, in the entire population, how many play guitar? How many play guitar that are interested in building? How many have the intelligence to even follow that kind of stuff and thinking about all these values and resistances and voltage and doing calculations. Like when we were doing the biasing on that super tremolo, you're sitting there doing all this math and stuff, where a lot of people might get turned off by that, even if they wanted to build their own amp.
Biasing tube amps, you have to make sure that you're really doing it correctly because the tubes are real expensive. They're easy to burn up, and so you want to make sure that also that the amp is working the way that it was intended to work, and so that's important. But Jackson, that was just this great adventure in that whole arena of designing things for those kind of people, and like so many things, IMC, I think they got into the company there. They just really wanted to trim it down and stuff, and they didn't really want to do the stuff I was designing, and so they just kind of let me go. And
then that's when you started at BBE?
Yeah. I interviewed with them, and at the time they weren't really looking for any engineering. They were very close to me. It's like I could get from where I lived to the BBE place in like 15 minutes. It was just so close to where I lived. So I thought, well, this would be great there. So I drove there, and it turned out that John McLaren Sr. was the one who was running it. And he was the one that ran Fender when I was let go. But his son, John McLaren Jr., was, he was there at Fender. And I was like super nice to him because he was just a real inquisitive kid. real nice guy. He would always come in. We talk about, all the things Fender was doing, and what about electronics? What about this and what about that?
He wasn't in the service department, but just kind of would be around.
He would just be around. I mean, as the son of the guy that was running Fender, he could kind of do whatever he wanted to do. And so, so he would come and he would hang out with me because I was real nice to him, and I would just spend time talking with him and teaching him stuff about electronics, which served me well because all those years later, as I interview at BBE, and John McLaren Sr. goes, well, we don't really have any need for an engineer right now, but thanks for stopping by. And so after I leave, then I found out that Johnny Jr. goes in and talks to his dad. He's like, what's the matter with you? You know who that guy, you know who he is? You know what he's done? And so because of a Johnny Jr. that I got hired. And so they brought me in, and I was the VP of engineering. And so I had to go through all their products and stuff and see what needed to be serviced and engineered and stuff. And they had a lot of problems at the time. They only had the BBE Sonic Maximizer.
That was kind of their main
that was what
item.
That's what was as they say, floating the boat. But the boat was having some problems, and because they had a car unit that was really, really bad. It was clicking and popping, and you could hear engine noise in the car, and people doing the competitions, they were just really upset with it. And so this thing was just off to the side. Nobody wanted to deal with it. And they had a guitar preamp that they tried, and it was really bad. It was, it would just shut off, and they had to recall all of them.
Oh, wow.
And then the actual BBE units, they were having a lot of service issues because they weren't particularly designed that well. The execution was a little bit kind of haphazard. They had a lot of mods that they had to do when they came back in because it was never really engineered with the idea we want these things to go out, be bulletproof, and
last, and not need servicing.
Fail. Because when I started there, I mean, we have 6 service technicians, and they were just stacking the repair units, and I mean, they were nearly up to the ceiling in the service department. I was like, okay, we got to do something about this mess here, and so.
Were components just getting overloaded, or just it wasn't protection?
No protection on the inputs or outputs, so they were popping the op amps. The traces were really tiny, and so they kept getting burned out. And and a lot of the guys that would buy the things, they didn't necessarily, they weren't the sharpest knife in the drawer, so they wouldn't necessarily always hook them up the right ways. And so, you would get stuff back in where they had maybe hooked the power amp up to the output from the power amp into the input to this little preamp unit here, and they're just like blow out sections of the board, and so I'd open these things up and just go, oh my gosh, this is nuts, and they go, dude, I just plugged it in, and I go, yeah, but to what? Yeah. And it was just interesting, so I would go through and go, this is going to all have to be redone, and so all new circuit board, it was just like all brand new circuit board layout designs, big thick traces, protection circuitry on the in and out and everything, a new facelift on the thing there, and then the preamp, just toss that into the can. I redid the car unit and made a proper one that could be used in competitions. And then the guitar preamp, I made a guitar, a bass, and an acoustic preamp, and then some other pedals and things for them and stuff to just kind of fill out their line and get them more stuff.
And you had quite a bit of pedals, like about 18 or so.
Yeah. There was about 18 pedals, and then there was a collection of like DI boxes and little tiny circuits that would go, because they also own Barkus Berry. Not a lot of people remember who that was, but they used to make the little piezo ceramic pickups that you could hook on violins or cellos, attach them electric microphones into flutes and stuff, and then I make little preamps and buffers for those, and you could, record like a acoustic piano. They had these things that would clamp onto the soundboard and stuff. So I made a bunch of products.
Do they still sell the whole line of pickups of pedals now?
No, the line, no, they just kind of let that languish and stuff. Again, it's one of those things where it sells so great. They made a lot of money in the early years of that stuff. I mean, it was, this doesn't sound like a lot of money, but for a company like that, when you're getting $50,000 to $60,000 a month of extra sales just in a couple of pedals, that was.
And I'm sure the margin is pretty good on pedals too.
Oh yeah, great margins on that. And because I made the extra effort to engineer to them in a way that they didn't really fail. You didn't get them back. And so you didn't spend a lot of money, trying to repair and service the stuff. They went out and they went out. And that lasted for many years. And then I think it was just that whole thing where, focus. How much focus can you put on things? And so there was the G&L guitars, the BBE, got access, bought the G&L.
That was when Leo died?
Yeah, when Leo passed away, Phyllis, his wife, said, okay, I want to sell this company, but I don't want to sell it to somebody that's just going to take the name and shove it overseas. And so John McLaren just said, well, we promise we'll keep the name here. And I'm just going, oh, this is so cool, man. I get to get back into guitars, so it was.
And you were in Leo's office for a period of time?
We did videos in his old office.
But you weren't working out of his office?
No, I wasn't working out of his office. It's funny, they made a little shrine kind of out of his office and his lab in the G&L facilities. To this day, they have...
They do tours through there?
They give tours through that. And I've done a couple of videos there where I've brought people in and just said, okay, here's his lab. These, you careful, you don't want to disturb too much of the stuff because it's dusty as hell in that office. And so, but it's just going through the history of him as a designer and some of the ideas he had. And there's a really cool, rack of this drawings, hand drawings by, you got Leo and, George Fullerton and all these guys, the design and ideas and stuff. It's pretty fascinating.
I'm surprised they don't have all those papers just like in a guitar museum.
They should. I don't know how you would do it, but if they could just take that whole office and transport it over into a museum, because it's really pretty fascinating. It's a very simple. You think of Leo Fender and all the designs and stuff like that, but you look at his lab and you go,
like it's just a desk.
It's just a scope, a desk, couple of meters, and just a bunch of parts and things. And it's not like this big sophisticated lab. It was just where he thought about ideas and created designs and stuff. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool hanging out there. And they do a good job of keeping everything very respectful. And I'd
like to check that out and take one of those tours.
It would be really cool. Actually, I could help you set that up. I'm sure Johnny would,
So is he running G&L right now?
His brother, his brother Dave is actually kind of running it. Johnny is like the second guy there. But he and I, we're still really close. I've liked the kid forever. He's a good, solid kid. Just really, really nice. And so,
kid, but he's probably 60-something years old.
That's true. See, that's funny. In my head, he's still this 18-year-old, kid that would come into my office and he was always excited. Oh, how does this work? This is really great. It's really funny. Yeah, I'm turning 70 in a couple of weeks. So,
happy early birthday.
Yeah, it sneaks up on you. Yeah, he's got to be in his 50s now. But yeah, I could see about getting you in there and get a tour.
That'd be really cool.
It's kind of neat. One of those things where they'd probably let you take the camera in and Johnny would probably give a pretty cool tour and let you in on all the stuff that's going on there, the history of the company there.
I love that.
It was a lot of fun working there. I enjoyed my time. I was there from 91 to 2014, and it was like that was a long time. I did a lot of products, and made it didn't come out officially, but there was a couple of tube amps that I made, and we took them to NAMM shows, and everybody loved them and stuff. And it was just that problem where you go, everybody wants it, they love it, it sounds great, but okay, we need this much capital to float this thing to get this thing going, and it's like we don't have that much money to work with,
because all of it's going into the guitars and stuff.
Yeah. Trying to keep the guitar factory going, and it took a lot of money there. There was a G&L acoustic guitar that I spent a lot of time working on and everything. Had a really nice, worked with the guys who worked at Martin and, good friends and stuff. And it was, what was the company? Oh, Tacoma Guitar Manufacturer up in Washington. They made like 200 G&L acoustic guitars. I don't know where they ended up going. They're around in the world somewhere.
But they couldn't. They never really took off.
Because that's the same thing. Where they just go, okay, in order to take this off, I need about $50,000 in cash. We're going to buy the materials. We're going to do this stuff here. It's interesting. The world I live in is like, okay, I engineer a product, and so I go, here's how it goes together. Here's what you need. Here's all the stuff here. Then it goes to the people that just say, can I make a profit doing this? And I'm going, I wish you'd do that up front before you send me down the road, because there's
they shut down a lot of things.
Yeah, a lot of things get shut down because maybe they don't really fully understand how much money it's going to cost to get into it. But there's a lot of ideas, and it's not like I'm the only one it happens to. But it's like there's companies where you got good ideas, but you don't have the capital to float it, and so they just kind of go to the wayside.
And then a lot of pickups you were designing for G&L too.
Yeah, we had a whole line of G&L pickups. One of my actually favorite ones is the one that I use on mine. It's the twin blade humbucker pickup. There was a company called Godo that makes pickups, for a lot of people. And when I was in Japan, I got to know these guys really, really well. And I kept in contact with the president of the company. And so he would always, from time to time, send me an email, hey, how are you doing? And, is there anything we can do for you? I'm going, yeah, there's this pickup that I want to make. You make something similar to it, but I want to wind it in a way that is not necessarily the way other people would do this. Would you be willing to make me some samples? So I goes, yeah. So I made me a bunch of samples. And so it is in the Legacy Special, has these twin blade humbucker pickups that sound very much, they don't sound exactly like a Strat, but they sound close enough where it's one of those things you can have a dead quiet guitar and you can get some of those kind of squawky tones that you get out of a
coil
Strat.
Split them too?
No. They're wound in a way that they're too light, where if you split it, it would just be so anemic sound and it wouldn't work. And that's where people go.
Similar to like a P90? Because a P90s are...
That's single coil.
But in terms of winds... Oh, yeah, I guess it's just a wider. Never mind. Yeah. I was thinking for a second, P90s would be, kind of more similar. Yeah, it is single coil.
Yeah, they call it like the aperture. You have the magnet. You have your string there, and so you have the magnet there, and then you have your coil of wire. And if the coil of wire is really, really tightly around that magnetic field there, that's your window. That's your aperture that's looking at the string and giving you the information. The P90, it's really all flat. I mean, the coil is way out here. And so it's actually sensing a very large area of the string. And so that along with some other things, I mean, this is why they sound so different. But what I wanted to do is I had these twin blades. They were extremely close together. So it's like taking a humbucking pickup and moving those two coils almost right up against each other like that. And you can make them hotter and you can make them splittable and stuff like that. But that wasn't what I was after, was something that would make you think you were kind of playing a Strat, but it was dead quiet.
Yeah, you could have higher gain without the noise.
Yeah, and it wasn't so thick and dark sounding that you would just go, well, if I want that, I'll just put a humbucker in the neck. And you go, no, if you put one of these little twin blades, the way that it's wound up in the neck, it still sounds, like single coil Stratty, that nice, a lot of throat sound to it, but some crispness and top.
What were the name of these pickups?
They called them twin blades.
Twin blades. Do they still manufacture?
It's what Godo makes them. It's a current model. It's still the Legacy Special, and it's the twin blade. I haven't looked at their website recently, but the last time I checked it, it was still on it.
And then when you were making them, did they pick them up and actually manufacture them, or is that more just a test?
No, they never invested in the tooling or the machinery to do those pickups like that. I don't know that they sold the volume high enough to kind of justify that, because that's what. And plus, I was so tightly controlling these guys at Godo. I mean, they made them exactly the way I wanted them, And I know the guys, and so they're not going to do something crappy or shady or anything like that. Because I would see them every year at the NAMM show. I'd go over to the booth and hang out with them and talk to them and just say, "Thank you very much, for this. Is there anything else we can do for you?" And, there's a lot of cool relationships that you can make in the music field. When with the manufacturers, it's a whole different set of people. You get like engineers from the companies. You know each other, and suppliers.
Well, and even
things
just
like
in
that.
guitars, you got so many different parts and so many different avenues, and you got amp people, you got pedal people, you got cable people, you got, you get wood sources and stuff. Like, I don't know. I was reading something recently even about like, I think it was Alaska, like one of the last mills of wood that supplies for like Steinways and stuff is basically about to shut down. And so like Steinway, and I think Gibson buys a lot of wood from them too. And, if they do end up shutting down, like where are these places going to be buying good quality wood?
It does. It gets hard. You got to deal with stuff like that. For a while, I thought vacuum tubes were going to go away. There was a time when it was hard to get a hold of good quality vacuum tubes, and then now you got JJ. They get Czechoslovakia. Got some companies in there. The Russia. China's starting to make some better tubes. So they're getting more and more prevalent. You can now go to like. I buy from a CE distribution, and then they have a like Tube Depot. You can now, it's still expensive. I mean, you've had to replace tubes and stuff. So, a set of power tubes, if you get a mash and stuff, I mean, you can drop $80 for just a pair of them.
Those KT66s were like, I think that was like $150.
Yeah. There's certain pairs where you're going to pay a lot of money for them, but you can get them. There was a time where we were just going, I don't know if we're going to be able to get these things.
Was that just when like the U.S. stopped making?
Yeah, they stopped making them, and then some of the other manufacturers that they were getting kind of shoddy, and people weren't willing to buy from them. And then you just sometimes it's just not the people demanding tubes. Back when everything was vacuum tubes, we were buying tubes, but then you go, okay, the only people buying vacuum tubes are guitar amp builders and only certain models and stuff. And so, you got these big factories that go, well, I'm not going to spend a lot of time making it for you. And I remember,
especially when you get more and more solid state amps
as they got better. And, now, I mean, you think of it, you can buy, I think $399 is what I paid for my Line 6 Catalyst amp. And I think Boss has their Katana, yeah.
You have the
and you play these things and you go, these things are pretty cool. You can get a lot of great sounds out of these things. I
like my Evans. The Evans amp that they normally made. I think they originally designed those for lap steel. But I would throw some pedals in front of that, and I had people going, man, that's the best sounding solid state amp I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, and so you've got this stuff where you go, okay, well, you want to spend $400 and buy this amp, there's all this stuff, or for $2,000, you can buy this tube amp that we,
you need a maintenance all
and you go, well, and so fortunately, there are a lot of people that still can afford that and like to do that because it lets me service and repair them. But, that might change in the years ahead. I think as long as there's a guitar player on the planet, there will be a desire for a tube amp.
If anything, for just nostalgia, because it's cool.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a certain,
organic.
I don't know, there's a certain tone to it, and just the way that it feels and everything that I find very enjoyable.
Because those newer modeling and profiling and those kind of they get pretty close, but I just feel something is missing through them. Even the best ones, I just love how a tube responds, even just hearing that little hiss in there, just knowing that you like, because you're used to playing with that. I mean, of course, if I'm tracking, I'll get that out. I'll use noise reduction processing to take it out when I need to. But I use those kind of modeling stuff, and they're okay. I'll use it when I teach. I'll use it if it's not a guitar focused song, if I'm just playing background guitar. Yeah. But anything where I'm doing true solos and really guitar-driven, serious songs, I want to mic up a tube amp.
Yeah, they are different, and the people who have modelers and have tube amps, they know that, and they make comments, and there's plenty of YouTube
It's more
videos.
just, I think, out of convenience, or if someone's playing a show and they're playing in a cover band, they got all these different songs, they could just program their patches and call it a day.
Yeah, it's very convenient for them. They're not lugging around a wall of amplifiers behind them and do that stuff. Because there was a time when people would do that. Show up to the studio. You have to have
the roadies doing it.
Yeah. Oh, the roadies. Yeah.
There's a lot of history there, Paul. So come back next week to check out part 2, where we're going to dive into some of the products he's been more recently designing. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you next week.